Thank you so much for coming out tonight. I think there's some late comers that will still come in, but we're going to get started so we can try to stay on time. Welcome to the second event of the Rhode Island chapter of the Independent Women's Network. The Independent Women's Network is a private, members-only community that can help you discuss the most important issues affecting our lives, community, and country. We meet and form lasting bonds with like-minded women, and we engage in informed, open, civil debate and dialogue. Finally, we work together to advance the principles that we all share. My name is Nicole Solas. I'm the organizer of this event. And I'm also a member of the Rhode Island chapter of the Independent Women's Network. John DePietro is here, everybody. I just have to point that out. We're lucky enough to have one of our best media people in Rhode Island here live streaming this. That way people at home can see this live, and we also are recording this event. If any of you feel uncomfortable at the end with a Q&A, we can turn that off at the end, but this event is meant to be interactive. If you have any questions, feel free to raise your hands, especially with our speaker, Sara Higdon, who I'll introduce once I'm done with my presentation. So most of you know me. I'm a mom from South Kingstown, and I enrolled my daughter in kindergarten and began to be concerned about indoctrination in public school. I called my school to ask if they're teaching gender ideology, and they said that they were teaching it through conversation and storytelling. I didn't really know what that meant, so one of the reasons why I'm having this event is to educate the public about what's going on in public school. Before I get into that a little more, I just want to give you a lineup. After I talk, you'll hear from Sara Higdon, who's our fleeing veteran and transsexual, who speaks out against indoctrination and medicalization of children through gender ideology. And then after that, we have attorney Candice Jackson, who is a partner at Jackson Bone LLP and former acting assistant secretary for civil rights and former deputy general counsel of the U.S. Department of Education. She's going to zoom in here for the last 10 or 15 minutes. So let's begin by defining what gender ideology is. Gender ideology is a theory, you can also refer to it as gender theory, and it replaces the biological sex binary of male and female with something called gender identity. Gender identity is how you feel about your sex or how you perceive your own sex. And it theorizes that a child can be born in the wrong body. So if they're born as a boy, they can feel like they're a girl and simply say, I identify as a girl, and vice versa for the other sex. And further, gender ideology says that society should treat you as the opposite sex if you feel like the opposite sex. And schools across the country are teaching this concept of gender ideology or gender identity as if it is objective truth or settled science, when really this is political ideology. It's not supported by biology, and it has no consensus in science or medicine. So how exactly are kids learning about this in public school? Well, like I said, I called my school to ask, and they said that they do it through storytelling and conversation, that there's no set curriculum. Now, I like to try to back up everything I can with writing, emails. So here's an email from the principal that you see here, where she says that we spoke briefly on the phone, and she confirms that there's no set curriculum. They tell stories. You may hear about preschools in Rhode Island and across the country that will read storybooks to kids that introduces this concept that they could be born in the wrong body, and that a boy could be a girl or a girl could be a boy. There are parents, if you talk to them, they don't know that these books are being read to their kids, confusing them. So if you have kids in preschool, you should really ask them what are the stories they're reading, and ask them to let you know what they were reading in class, really any day. Now this is a college level concept that's being taught starting in preschool and in kindergarten, and the fact that there's no set curriculum on how to teach this is very concerning, because a lot of adults don't even understand what this ideology is. And you know, we hear a lot about how, we don't teach college concepts in kindergarten, but well, apparently we are teaching a college concept called gender ideology starting in kindergarten. Now, instead of a set curriculum, teachers are free to create their own lessons that draw from whatever sources they want. Those sources can be YouTube, TED Talks, radical political organizations. They literally can be anything. For those of you that don't know, there's something called a teaching resource, and literally anything can be a teaching resource. It can be a website that you find on Google, so there's no parameters for this. And I actually have here the gender ideology lesson plans that are taught to South Kingstown students, I believe in the 10th grade. So this were a public records request made by somebody else that they sent to me. And here you see gender identity, sex orientation, expression. This is one part of the sex education that's taught in South Kingstown. As you see right here, we have human sexuality, and right here where I highlight it says, what did your parents teach you about sex? Which is a very interesting thing to place at the first part of a lesson plan, because gender identity that's taught in school is really interested in what's going on at home with parents. Parents, as you'll see, are somewhat of they are the enemy to gender ideology being taught in school. As you go down here, we get to the gender-bred person. The gender-bred person is what is being used to teach children about gender identity. And children are being taught that, right here, gender isn't binary. Now, this is an unequivocal statement saying that gender isn't binary. It's not introducing students to a concept that they may or may not agree with. It's not telling them that this is a political theory. It's telling them that gender isn't binary, meaning it's not just male or female, there are other genders, as if this is objective truth. So that's problematic in school. As we go down here, we can see that they say how you present gender is through your actions, clothing, demeanor. Down here on gender identity, they say that your gender can be womanness, manness, and they say that your womanness or your manness is defined by your personality traits, jobs, hobbies, likes, dislikes, roles, expectations. So to a child, what's really going on is they're telling them that sex stereotypes define their gender. Because if you're a woman who works in a job of, say, construction, does that make you less of a woman? Think about your likes and dislikes. If you like something that is feminine and you're a boy, does that make you less of a boy and more of a girl? So you can see how when children are taught this, and I can't say for sure how exactly this is taught in the classroom because this is just the lesson plan or the lesson material, that's something that is concerning and confusing, because I think as a society we all understand what gender roles are, and that a boy who may be more feminine is still a boy, and a girl who may be more masculine is still a girl. But this lesson plan is contradicting that. They introduced them to this concept here called sex assigned at birth. This is an idea that when you're born, your doctor looks at your sex and assigns it to you. It isn't something that just is, right? You're either male or female because that's your biology. But now they're teaching children that that's something that's assigned to you, and that you should have that you have the right to choose your sex, which is your gender identity. So this is something, if you all want, I can email it to you so you can go over it more. This is some of the politics that also are included. They go over the pride flag, gender symbols. This is something called the cycle of oppression that's included in this lesson plan. Now again, I can't say exactly how this is taught in school, but this is a political idea, this idea of a cycle of oppression. That first we have a stereotype that creates a prejudice, which leads to discrimination, oppression, and then internalized oppression. I don't know how the teacher is incorporating this, but it's concerning that something very highly political and controversial is included in sex education in public school. They're then introduced to genderqueer, transgender, agender, bigender, cisgender, gender fluid, and then of course all of these highly politicized terms, including the famous pronouns, ze and zer, they and them. I think most of you in this room know that when you are wanting to transition to the opposite sex, you're then encouraged to use opposite sex pronouns or made-up pronouns like ze and zer. Mix is a word that you use instead of Mr., Miss, and Mrs. And depending on how the teacher teaches this, which again I can't say for sure, you could teach this in a way that says if you don't use these pronouns, that you are being hateful, that you are a bigot. I've held this event before in the past, and I was protested and called a bigot myself simply because I wanted to go over the facts about what's going on in public school. I'm just going to go down here because this is another political part of this lesson. You'll see it's called An Ally for Change. A lot of gender identity lessons are encouraging children to be political activists for gender identity. So an ally for change is Marxist terminology, and they're saying that, like right here, this is more politicized terminology. What are some privileges that cisgender people have versus transgender, genderqueer, gender fluid? For those of you that don't know, cisgender means someone whose sex aligns with their gender identity. The biggest takeaway from this lesson plan is that kids are being taught that they all have a gender identity. It's not an idea that they're allowed to reject when they're being taught this. So parents are concerned about that because, for example, I don't believe in gender ideology, I believe in biology. And I don't have a gender identity myself, I just have a sex, I just am female. A lot of people on the other side of this argument believe that saying something like that is hateful. However, again, this is a political theory, right? It's in the name, gender theory. It's not gender reality. And it's concerning that kids are being taught this and not having a chance to have their own beliefs or even be told that this is not objective reality. Down here are some of the YouTube videos, and I wanted to play one for you to show you that teaching gender identity in class is it's sort of like a mission. So this is part of a video that is shown in that, sorry, 1 second. So this is a video that would be shown to kids in that class in South Kingstown. And this is a person named Charlie Higdon, is a female who transitioned to a male. And she's giving a TED Talk about her transition and why she believes it's important to have gender identity taught in school. So I'm just going to play one portion of this for you.
Of going to a workplace and being discriminated.
Can you guys hear that?
I'm afraid of telling people who I am. I'm getting better at it, but it's still difficult for me. So how can we spread awareness? How can we make it more possible for people to understand and accept people like me into their community? Because that's what needs to happen. I think a good step towards that is appropriate representation in sexual education in schools. Without it, kids won't understand or know what being transgender is. I have come out to so many people who have turned around and said, I don't understand what you're talking about. Okay, please explain to me. And I'll happily explain, but it shocks me how so little people in this country don't understand it. And the problem isn't within ourselves, it's within the sexual education system. We have the opportunity to teach students about who we are and what we stand for. And this doesn't just add towards a more accepting and peaceful community, but this means that people who are questioning their own gender and their own issues will be able to stand forward and get rid of that uncertainty that I was missing. I didn't have that opportunity to know what I was feeling. I didn't know what it was called. That uncertainty kept me within my shell, and it kept me hiding away from who I am. So with appropriate representation in sexual education classes, people who are questioning their gender can freely think about it, because it's something that people should explore. Whether you identify as transgender or not, you should definitely explore your gender and your gender expression. And self-discovery is such an important thing that I don't understand why it's not enforced more into a school society.
So as you can see from that video, teaching gender identity is really more about activism, right? This is about making people who have gender dysphoria feel more represented. Now, what this, and of course, it's also about saying that exploring your gender identity is for everyone, even if you don't have gender dysphoria, if you're not questioning your gender. And I think a lot of parents have a problem with that because this is, again, a political belief. What this video does not show, however, is the other side of gender ideology. And that's the side of gender ideology that is psychologically harmful, that is physically harmful to children. And this whole lesson that I showed you in South Kingstown does not go over a very important group of people called detransitioners. These are people who have transitioned socially and medically as children. And then as adults, they have regretted it after doing permanent harm and damage to their body. So I have a video here that I'd like to show you of a now famous transitioner. Her name is Chloe Cole, and she is speaking out against... They're trying to silence me, sorry. Okay, I'm back. So here is Chloe Cole.
Past decade,
Sorry.
there's been as high as a 4,000% increase in children being referred to so-called gender clinics across the United States. I was one of these children. My name is Chloe Cole, and I'm an 18-year-old former transgender child. I transitioned from the age of 12 up until 16 when I realized all was a lie. My story is cautionary tale. Children and parents across the country have been caught off guard by gender ideology. Discussions about transgenderism and gender identity went from being a relatively benign social oddity to a doctrine that has invaded nearly every academic, medical, and educational institution, seemingly overnight. How did we get to this point? How did we get to the point where nearly every pediatric institution in the country considers it best practice to remove the healthy breast tissue of children while administering drugs typically used to chemically castrate high-risk sex offenders? Raising these important questions is not bigoted, and the refusal of activists to give straightforward answers should be seen as a major red flag. People across the entire political spectrum who believe that this practice is morally wrong have been told that they are fascists or bigots for even questioning this atrocity. Others have been convinced by self-proclaimed gender specialists that this is the only treatment that will not end in your child committing suicide. I believe Americans deserve to know the truth about this radical and perverse ideology, marketed as necessary and life-saving healthcare. I was only 12 years old when I told my parents that I was a boy. Like many parents in that situation, they didn't have a clue what to do. They were scared and desperate for answers. They wanted what every parent wants for their child. They need to be okay and private. At 13 years old, on the advice of so-called medical professionals, I was put on puberty blockade medication. And only a month later, I was given my first testosterone injection. The gender clinic presented my parents with the classic false dichotomy.
Can't hear it, Nicole.
Now the mic is off.
Would you rather have a dead daughter or a living son? Given these options, what loving parent wouldn't choose to transition their child? Scared for my life, my parents were prepared to sign anything the doctors asked. This was not informed consent. It was a decision forced under extreme duress. At 15, I went under the knife for a radical double mastectomy, the kind that breast cancer patients get. This was after I was sexually assaulted at school by a male student. I just told myself to man up, but I lived my life in constant hatred of my breasts. I started binding, which deformed my breasts as well as my ribcage. I was afraid, and I couldn't wait to finally protect my body from further molestation. At 16, I finally realized what happened to me, that I had made a huge mistake. I realized the beauty of motherhood was stolen from me by medical professionals who my family and trust me. I realized after returning to Bidler that a child is not, in fact, known who they are at 12 years old. I realized that I wanted to be what I always was, to be forever a woman. With this realization came a series of challenges that were far worse than a transition. Somehow, I had to get myself off these drugs and tell everyone in my entire life that I was not who I said I was. My parents were shocked and felt like they failed me on every level imaginable. My friends all turned against me because I was evidence that the police were alive. I was a joke. I was a fraud. I was many years behind in development, incapable of feeding my future children, and worst of all, completely alone. Even the medical professionals who got me into this mess now have no idea what to do with me, and they refuse to help me. It almost killed me, as it's killed many who regret transition. Big question still remains. I was a 12-year-old who used the idea that they could do something as ridiculous as change their sex. I was and still am the type of kid that never really fit in social norms. I was a tomboy, I was shy, I didn't socialize easily. At 11, I made my first Instagram account. I had unmonitored internet access. It wasn't...
Sorry, I just have to stop that there because I'm running out of time. But Chloe Solas, someone I encourage you all to look up, she's doing a really good job speaking out against this. And as you can tell, she's a child who wasn't told about all of the harm that can come with this. In school, it's kind of presented as, oh, we can use different pronouns and change your name and change your clothes. But what children aren't told is that they're then given all of this love bombing and they're encouraged, and that eventually leads to medical transition. So this has a lot more to do with what's happening to kids medically. Now, let me just click out of this. Now, these lessons are reinforced by a school policy that is in all of Rhode Island schools. It's called the Transgender and Gender Expansive Non-Discrimination Policy. And I have that slide right here in South Kingstown. And this is something I found when I enrolled my daughter in school. And again, this policy is in all Rhode Island schools. It was voted on in 2017 by the Rhode Island Department of Education's Elementary and Secondary Council. Now this is called a non-discrimination policy. However, what is concerning in the policy is that it encourages, or in many cases mandates, schools to keep secrets from parents. So if your child goes to school as a boy and says he wants to be a girl, teachers across Rhode Island are being told that they cannot tell the parents. And this is based on whether the student is going to say that they don't feel comfortable telling their parents on the basis that it is not safe to tell the parents, and I have that highlighted right here. It says, in some cases, notifying parents carries the risk for a student, such as a family rejection or physical abuse. Prior to notification of any parent regarding the transition process, school staff should work closely with the student to assess the degree to which, if any, the parent will be involved in the process of gender transition. So instead of notifying the parents, what they do instead is have something called a gender support plan, which I have here for you. This is a gender support plan from a middle school in West Warwick called Deering Middle School. And as you see, the very first thing they want to know is the parent or guardian involvement. I blacked out some names here for privacy. This was given to me by a teacher who was too scared to, be named, that she gave this policy. This policy goes over any pronouns that the children should have that are different, a name that they'll write down, so they'll be calling the student a different name at school, not telling the parents, having kids lead these double lives. Also the use of facilities. Boys can go into girls' bathrooms, girls can go into boys' bathrooms if they have a different gender identity. And that also includes use of facilities like at overnight field trips. So boys can be sleeping in the girls' bunk and girls can be sleeping in the boys' bunk. And they're not going to tell the parents. Here's a similar gender support plan in Exeter, West Greenwich. Let's see, right here, are the parents aware of the preferred name? So keeping parents excluded from this is really the goal of schools. They don't want to tell you if your kids have a identity crisis. And now the problem with that is that this is something that is rife with suicide ideation. So this is something where, kids are possibly going to commit suicide if they have this identity crisis, and parents aren't going to know. There's lawsuits across the country that are happening, and I have a video here of a family who found out that their daughter was being socially transitioned at school. She had never exhibited any kind of struggles with her gender or sex at home, and they just got a phone call that their daughter attempted suicide at school, and they had no idea that any of these gender transitions were happening. This is the Perez family.
A mother and father in Florida are suing their school district after their 12-year-old daughter attempted suicide at her school. According to the parents, it was only then that they were notified that she had been receiving counseling from the school about her gender identity and that it was kept from the family because of their Catholic faith. The Child and Parental Rights Campaign is representing the parents. And joining us now is Wendell and Maria Perez and their legal counsel, Bernadette Royals, president of the Child and Parental Rights Campaign. Thank you all so much for joining us. Wendell, Maria, I want to start off with the two of you. First off, I just want to say we're all so sorry for what you and your family have gone through. We're praying for you all, especially your daughter. If you don't mind, can you tell us about the moment that you found out about your daughter and those meetings that were taking place in school? What went through your mind?
Well, do you want me to give you like a summary of what happened that day?
That would be great.
Yes, well, we were called by the school council on January 5th, 2022, and they said that it was about our daughter. We were there, and when we got there, they told us that our daughter was, she tried to commit suicide by hanging herself, and that he happened twice in 2 days. School council alleged that it was because of a gender identity issue, and that they knew that we as parents would not be in agreement because of our Catholic faith. My daughter never exhibited any signs of gender confusion or questioning her biological sex. And then the counselor also revealed that for the first time, that she had been secretly meeting with our daughter for months, talking about her gender identity issue. All of these meetings occur without our knowledge. The school council went so far as to encourage and call our daughter by a fictitious male name and pronouns in front of other students, causing a pattern of bullying against my daughter. And again, all these behind our backs. When we asked them why they didn't notify us about these meetings, they said that there was a confidentiality issue involved that prevented them from telling us about these meetings. So then our daughter was taken to a local hospital by the police. They admitted her into a behavioral unit with minimum contact with us, and she was kept there until January 12th when she was released into our care.
So again, this is the Perez family. You can follow their story if you look them up online. I had so much more to tell you, but running out of time, I can never time this just right, and I want to turn it over to Sara Higdon, who's our featured speaker today, because I think she can help us understand how this is very harmful to kids, but, oh, sorry, let me come over here. And also to sort of dispel the myth that anyone who doesn't want their kids to be indoctrinated into gender ideology is simply hateful, is simply a bigot, hates the LGBT community. That's something that a lot of parents like myself get when, none of us are hateful. None of us, we all want people to live their lives as they want to live their lives. But we have parental rights, and we should be able to direct the upbringing and care of our children without schools violating our parental rights, because that's really what's going on when they're hiding these policies and these procedures from parents. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Sara Higdon. She is a founding member of an organization called Against Groomers, and she's here to help us understand better the harms of gender ideology indoctrination in children. Let's give Sara a round of applause.
So first, I just want to thank you guys for being here. Thank you, Nicole, for having me. Thank you for the Independent Women's Forum and Independent Women's Network for bringing me up to Rhode Island to speak to you. I live in Georgia, so I'm here just for this event. Now I have some talking points I want to go over, but I do prefer questions. I think this should be more engaging so that you guys can ask the questions and it's more beneficial to everybody to kind of understand what's going on. So, who am I? My name is Sara Higdon. As she said, I served 7.5 years in the United States Army as a logistics officer. I'm a content creator. I do YouTube. I do graphic design. I'm also a freelance writer. I have pieces that are written up in human events, multiple pieces in human events, and then multiple pieces in the post-millennial as well. But I kind of want to ask the question, it's kind of the question of the year, right? What is a woman? So, and it's pretty simple. A woman is an adult human female. All right, so.
Turn on that other mic.
Okay. So, a woman is an adult human female, and I am not in this camp that trans women are women. I think that does a lot of erasure, not only of women, but of trans women. I say trans women are trans women because I don't know what it's like to grow up going through puberty as a female. I don't know what it's like to grow up and have a period or be able to get childbirth. That's never going to happen for me. But what most people don't understand is, so what most people don't understand either is what it's like to have gender dysphoria. And that's what I have. I know what it's like to have gender dysphoria. I don't know what it's like, I don't even know what women feel like. Right? I mean, does every woman think that they feel exactly the same? I mean, there are some common stuff between women that they all feel and they all go through, some common experiences.
I think if you go over more to the left, you've got what's happening. The speaker up there is picking up your sound and it's piggybacking on it. That's why it's speaking. So you're going to stand more in the middle.
Stage left.
So that doesn't make us the same. So, can I go up further? Does this work? Okay. So that doesn't make us the same though, and it doesn't give me a right to speak on what it means to be a woman or to speak for you. All I can tell you is what it's like to have gender dysphoria and feel uncomfortable in my biological sex, and so I had to transition to feel comfortable with who I am. But I'm an adult, right? And so the key that we're talking about right now is children. Some of you guys in this room may not agree with how I live my life. That's fine, again, I'm an adult.
You're an adult.
But we can all come together and protect children. And that's what we're here for tonight, and that's basically where Trans Against Groomers has stood up, Gays Against Groomers, I'm a contributor over there as well. We stood up to fight against the queer theory ideology that's happening across the country and taking over and harming our children.
We don't need it. Sorry.
It's okay.
Good idea.
Just throw your voice.
Yeah, I was in the Army, okay? I was in the Army, so I can speak a little bit. So personally, my journey, I got out of the Army in 2017. I moved to Atlanta, where I really started to begin to explore this feeling that I've had since I was about 4 years old. I always felt something was different about me from the age of 4. And now, activists will use that to say, well, you knew at 4 years old, so don't 4-year-olds know that there's something different about them and they should be able to change their identity. The way I put it is, a square is a rectangle, but a rectangle is not a square. So, meaning, almost every transsexual I know knew something was different from a very young age. But only about 20% of the people that know that there's something different at a very young age actually go on to transition or don't grow out of it by the age of 16. And see, when I started coming out, started to explore, I got into some of the online message boards, specifically Reddit. If you've ever been on Reddit, Reddit is one of the worst places where a lot of this stuff festers because you get into some of these message boards, and especially the trans message boards, they are filled with people just talking And it's all what we call hug boxing, where it's all like, no, yeah, you're probably trans, and pushing people into this ideology. Now there's a term, it's called transgender. It started to become popular around 2016, 2017, and it was really as the social contagion aspect started taking over. And transgenders were those that were only grabbing onto this label because it was trendy to do. I got kicked out of multiple Reddit groups for saying that transgenders exist, and when the detransition rate skyrockets, it will hurt actual trans people. And look what we're seeing now. We're seeing people like Chloe, who is a good friend of mine, coming out in droves because they were manipulated into this ideology that they didn't know what they were getting themselves into, and they started to transition, right? And the problem is, I mean, I think a lot of this trend is like when I was in high school, or when I was in high school, it was like the goth kids. It was people that needed somewhere to belong, and so they found this group that would accept them for who they are. The only difference now is we're medicalizing them, and we're exploiting them. The medical community is actually exploiting them. But to kind of give the background of who I am, the reason why I'm speaking out is because, I mean, I couldn't sit back and let this happen to children before they even reach the age of consent. I mean, that's really what it is. We have the age of consent in this country because before that point, we don't think that as a society we have come up with and said, children do not have the cognitive ability to understand the full ramifications of their actions before that age. And yet now we're putting them on puberty blockers well before that age. I mean, you heard Chloe, she was put on puberty blocker at the age of 13. She was put on testosterone at the age of 13. Which that can cause a whole lot of issues to a young female's body. It's amazing what's going on. But they'll say puberty blockers. Puberty blockers are fully 100% reversible. Well, the fact is they're not. So, So in the recent WPATH guidance, they came out and basically admitted this. They kind of hide it in chapter 6 a lot because in one point it says fully reversible, but then two lines later it says, but you should advise your patients on possible bone density issues that may arise from this.
Can you tell them what WPATH is?
Okay, so WPATH is the World Professional Association of Transgender Health. They are who provides the guidance to doctors and who, like everybody, it's like the standard. Like it protects doctors because they give the guidance and then doctors just execute their guidance and say, well, we were just following this organization's guidance because they're the experts, so we're going to follow their lead. And so they just released their guidance of their 8th version of their guidance just a few months ago. And it's interesting because they use all these studies in their guidance to say, yeah, they're fully reversible. But then one line later, they say, well, there's really not enough data, or it was a small study of only like 80 people, so we don't really have the full data. They admit that there's brain developmental issues that can arise from it because stopping puberty during key developmental years, I mean, who would think that that could be detrimental to somebody's brain development? I don't know. And then they also admit too, because most people don't even know that Lupron is being prescribed off-label. So it's not approved by the FDA or the CDC for use on children in, again, key developmental years. All the studies that they use are based on precocious puberty. And precocious puberty is when a child goes into puberty, say 6, 7 years old, you know, that's too young, and so they try to get them to a normal age to go through puberty, which makes sense. And so for them, it is fully reversible because then they will develop normally. One of the things, though, that is really striking, and so this video I want to show here in a second, It is Marcy Bowers, and if you know who Marcy Bowers is, she was in the What is a Woman documentary. She's also Jazz Jennings surgeon. She's one of the most well-known surgeons for male to female bottom surgeries around the world. She also got her start doing female genital mutilation surgery, like correcting those. And so now she is the president of WPATH. And the reason why I say this, she gives me a little bit of hope, is because she's actually speaking out a little bit against this. Last year, she had an article that she was interviewed by Abigail Schreier. And if you know Abigail Schreier, she wrote the book Irreversible Damage. And so Marcy Bowers actually teamed up with her last year to talk about how using puberty blockers stunts penile growth in young males. And you can't reverse that. And so what they expected, her complaint was that they expect surgeons to be miracle workers because to create a neovagina, you need more tissue. If you don't have that tissue, you graft it from other areas of the body, and anytime you graft from other areas of the body, there's more likely to be complications, which also creates more money because it has to be corrected. But this video, Marcy lets out another big secret about what puberty blockers can do to children as well. So,
second is was an observation that I had that every single child who was, or adolescent who was truly blocked at Tanner stage 2 has never experienced orgasm. I mean, it's really about 0. These are of course, these are just assigned male at birth, so trans feminine, and it's because they never in their lives are exposed to testosterone. That doesn't change. That doesn't change. So blockers prevent the rise of testosterone, and they don't really go on testosterone at or around surgery or into adulthood. And so we don't know. They're going to have the sensation. There's no question about that. But are they going to be able to achieve sexual satisfaction? It's important in relationships, and I know that through my work with female genital mutilation survivors, that the lack of being able to be intimate with a partner is very important. And so this is what really raised the red flag for me, is to say, look, we need to have our eyes open about it. I think it's been beneficial talking about it. I know Joe and many others have reported to me, they've changed their approach a little bit in their informed consent models, and that we're talking about masturbation now. We're talking about, okay, that's an area of the body that's got very dysphoric for you, but you know what? All a penis is just a large clitoris. I mean, it's all the same material. It really is. So use it for the pleasurable purposes, partially that it was intended, and we'll see what happens. But these are to be answered questions. So can we avoid puberty and get good adult results? And secondly, how do we assure someone that they're going to be able to be sexually responsive? Do we remove the blockers during the course of their adolescence and let a little bit of puberty come back? Do we delay it a little bit? Maybe into Tanner's 3 or 4, maybe before they have their first orgasms, maybe.
So yeah, like I said, it gives me hope because she's asking the questions. She's asking the questions that need to be answered. Because what she's saying is, every child that goes on puberty, or puberty blockers, before they even reach puberty, they're never able to orgasm as an adult. And so basically they're taking away the sexual satisfaction that these children don't even know what they're giving up because they're not even able to experience that before they give it up. So how can you even consent to that? Again, go back to the age of consent. How do you consent to that if you don't even know what it means, what it's going to mean? And a lot of these children also become asexual, which means that they don't even want to have sex. So you're taking away their sex drive completely as well. Which is, that's important in adulthood. And like I said, activists will start to say, well, why are you worried about children orgasming? It's not that. Again, it's that you don't want them to give up something before they know what it means. And it's very detrimental. And these surgeries, I have no idea why they push so hard for, well, I do know why. and I'm going to explain that in a second. Why they push so hard for these surgeries, though, before the age of 18. I mean, they'll say because it gives dysphoria, but you can go to therapy and work on getting, helping with that dysphoria until you reach the age of 18, and you can actually make this, consent. And the thing is if you wait till the age of 18, that stuff's still going to be there that you want to get removed or get changed, and you're probably going to have better results. So we shouldn't be pushing children into this that early. And again, they will say that me saying this is, transphobic in some way. But I'll tell you, I don't think that young girls, young females that want to have breast implants at the age of 16 should be getting that either. I think that life-altering elective surgery, and I say elective, should happen after the age of 18. Why is that controversial to say? Again, it's because of my next point. This is a postmodern neo-Marxist ideology where they don't believe in sex or sexuality. Because postmodernism, basically they don't believe that there's any such thing as absolute truths, which is an absolute truth statement in itself. So they don't even really, their ideology doesn't make sense anyways. And I actually talk about this too because a lot of the original LGBT is based off of sex. And so the queer theorist, which is where I always say like the non-binary and queer theorists kind of separated from the original LGBT because they don't actually agree, they don't even think that the original LGBT exists. And the T standing for transsexual because that's important because transsexuals believe that there's still a binary sex, and we know that we don't transition between sexes, as I explained before. Whereas non-binary is something completely different. When they changed the term from transsexual to transgender, they put an umbrella out there that said anything that is not associated with your biological sex is now trans. So that opens it up to the whole queer theory debate. But now why are they looking at surgeries for minors? Because they know 80% of gender nonconforming kids will end up growing out of it by the age of 16. And it's funny because I used to think that the Lisa Lippman study, that's whose study I'm quoting, I used to think that it was bunk. It was not accurate because it wasn't actually talking, it didn't actually look at all like trans people with gender dysphoria. It looked at all gender nonconforming children. But now we're telling any gender nonconforming child that they're trans. So now the study has validity. So it's actually gained validity years after it was settled. And we had kind of said, oh, it's not settled, or that's not accurate because of the way that the study was set up, and now it is. It's almost like a foregone conclusion. But the reason why so if you grow out of it by the age of 16, you're not going to make them the money. Now my next video is a finance person at the University of Vanderbilt who just recently shut down their gender studies or their gender clinic because of Matt Walsh and the Daily Wire uncovering this video and exposing it to the world and them realizing that this is not what they want to do. Plus the state of Tennessee has also taken steps to ban, like they just passed a bill or they are about to pass a bill that is about to ban puberty blockers for children or any medical transition for children. So.
And first, 2017, according to the Affordable Care Act, insurance carriers are mandated to cover medical expenses for trans folks.
So Obamacare, they're mandated to cover it. So it's not you actually taking it out of pocket. Obamacare is going to pay for it too.
Well, it is some
money. Financial folks in October of 2016, starting a couple years ago, cut down some costs of how much money we think each patient would bring in. This is only including top surgery. This isn't including any bottom surgery. And it's a lot of money. These surgeries make a lot of money. So female to male chest reconstruction can bring in $40,000. A patient just got routine hormone treatment, who I'm only seeing a few times a year, can bring in several $1,000s, but requires a lot of visits and labs. It actually makes money for the hospital. are making. And this is, I think this has to be an underestimate. This is for vaginoplasty. They're saying they're quoting roughly around $20,000 for vaginoplasty, but that doesn't include your hospital stay, that doesn't include your post-op visits, that doesn't include your anesthesia, your OR. So I would think that this has to be a gross underestimate. I think that's just like the surgeon's piece of it, which anything who's ever been in a hospital knows that that's like 10% of it. And the female to male bottom surgeries, these are huge money makers. Again, I think this has to be an underestimate that they're quoting around $20,000 for a phalloplasty. There's been different things that I read that it could be up to $100,000. Dr. Winokur, who's our surgeon, says that there's entire clinics where the entire clinic is supported just by their phalloplasties, and that is like a fraction of the surgeries that they're doing. These surgeries are labor intensive, they require a lot of follow-ups, they require a lot of OR time, and they make money. They make money for the hospital.
So yeah, if you don't know, phalloplasty is what young females get to create a penis. They have extremely high complication rates. They are, I don't know why anyone would get one, honestly, just because I've always heard it's not if you get complications, but when and how bad they are, which means you're going to be a medical patient requiring follow-ups for the rest of your life, which is why she thinks that that is an underestimate, which she's right. It probably is an underestimate for a surgery like that. But it's all about money. Now, if you know, there's a story about the governor of Illinois, J.B. Pritzker, and he actually was just reelected, which again, I don't know how, but it's Illinois. So, his family, his sibling is trans, and they are multi-millionaires. Like, they started some organizations, but he's the governor of Illinois. In 2014, I believe, don't quote me on the year, their family founded, or they gave the money to start up the Lori Children's Hospital in Chicago, which does perform trans care. Now, he's the governor of Illinois. He has created the curriculum and implemented the curriculum into the school districts for gender ideology. And now the Lori Children's Hospital is providing materials to the schools to teach them this stuff. It's a cycle. He gets his, and it goes over. It's a big circle, and it's like, I don't know how that's not a conflict of interest, and he hasn't been impeached for this. But again, it's going on.
It's in Rhode Island too.
Well, I don't know Rhode Island politics, but yeah. But like I said, I mean, this is postmodern neo-Marxism. And now when you start to look into the neo-Marxist area of this, you start to see that neo-Marxists don't want your children to belong to you, they want your children to belong to the state. They want to take your children for not affirming their genders. So my last video is during the WPATH guidance conference, which just took place a couple of weeks ago, maybe a couple of months ago, where they talk about this, because there is a section where it says parents should be involved unless that's not possible. So, watch the video.
Atlanta, Georgia area, and a few things came to mind. I had to make a call to Child Protective Services on a case, and the Child Protective Services worker asked me if some of the issues that I was calling about were about the parents not being supportive or being emotionally abusive around gender identity issues. And that was educative for me to learn that in my conservative state, there are at least some child protective service workers who are willing to enforce the need for affirmation by parents, at least with social transition needs, names, pronouns, etc. So that may be a resource in states, provinces, regions, countries around the world. So that's one thought. And even for making that call, like even letting parents know that if that's true where you are practicing, that might get their attention a little bit.
So they're threatening parents that if you don't affirm, that they're going to call CPS. And we know states like California have already put laws on the books that if a child runs away to California, they will transition your child if that child wants to transition. Basically, they give all that onus on the child. They can make their own medical decisions in California. But that's a professor, and that's why they wrote that section into the WPATH guidance. That gives your child all the power in the relationship. Not even just when it comes to gender ideology, but it just gives your child all the power, because it shows that if you don't do what your child wants, they'll just call CPS on you. And I think CPS is one of the worst organizations that we have because they are abused. And this just takes away resources for the actual need for CPS, which is actually abused children. And then you saw Chloe mention how we're manipulating parents. We are telling parents that if we don't affirm their child's gender, if we don't put them on puberty blockers and hormones, that they are going to commit suicide. And usually those conversations take place in front of the children. So it creates a foregone conclusion, right? So that child is now being told that, oh shoot, this medical professional thinks if I don't get the treatment that I need, I'm going to kill myself. So they're being put this idea in their head. And so it becomes this cycle. And so we need to stop medical professionals from saying that this is a thing, because it's not a thing. It's interesting because when you actually look at suicidality based on behavioral checklist scores, so trans children or children with gender dysphoria with similar behavioral checklist scores have a suicidality rate the exact same as any child that's not having gender identity issues. So if you compare apples to apples, it's a non-story. It's just we need to get these children mental health instead of trying to transition them, which still has a high mortality rate after they transition. And now it's going to be even worse because a lot of these detransitioners now go through life and then they made a mistake, and you can't reverse that mistake. You can wait and hope to and try to pass a little bit when you get older, but you can't reverse it. And even I wrote an article in Human Events, and it was the first one I actually put out there, and it's based on a sunk cost fallacy of gender transition. And the idea of the sunk cost fallacy, if you don't know, it kind of comes from investing. And so you invest into something so heavily, and then you realize, maybe I should just cut my losses and get out of this investment. But because you've already invested so much into it, you don't get out of it. It's actually why those little internet video games, why they work so well, because you've invested money into it, and so now you're going to keep playing, and to keep playing, you got to invest more money into it, and that's a form of a sunk cost fallacy. But the sunk cost fallacy for trans kids starts at the time that they socially transition and change their names and pronouns, because they deal with adversity at that point. I mean, parents start to go along with it. Maybe they have issues, and grandparents may not be supportive, or family members may not be supportive, or they may lose friends. Those are all investments that they're making because of this. And then once you start medically transitioning, it just becomes even more, because like I said, you can't reverse it. You've already made the decision, you've already gone into it. So to turn around is not an easy thing to do, especially when you've had surgeries, which I have friends that are detransitioners that have had surgeries and now regret it. I say that because while I think that if we're gonna even go down this path, we can talk about socially transitioning kids or letting them just be non-binary. I think that's a good step because it's not medically transitioning. And if they grow up and they still feel the same way that they do, then we can then we can let them do what they do as adults. But as children, it's our job to protect them from making those mistakes. And that's what society is not doing as a whole in pushing this ideology onto them. And like I said, it's not without risk, because if you allow a child to socially transition, they may go down a route that they don't feel comfortable with, but they keep going because how do you tell people that you made a mistake? I mean, Chloe explained it perfectly, how now when she told her parents then felt like they failed her on every level. And so how do you make somebody, you've made a mistake and you made all these people go along with that mistake. So how do you go on and reverse course and just tell everybody, oh, sorry, I made a mistake, I'm going back to doing all this stuff. It just doesn't happen that way. And that's also one of the reasons why I think 98% of the people that are put on puberty blockers go on to take cross-sex hormones. It's because they've started this medical transition and it's not easy for them to reverse course. And actually, Scott Nugent, who was also in the Matt Walsh's What is a Woman documentary, he told me at one point that he regrets his transition. He transitioned at 40-something years old, and he regrets his transition, but he's not going to detransition because that would be stupid. That's basically what his words to me were. And that means that he is stuck in a sunk cost fallacy. Do I detransition and live my life, looking like a mutilated man-woman? I don't know. or do I just try to live out looking like a man and saying that? And that's where he's at as well. That's what I was about to add. And it's interesting because we are seeing more and more people starting to stand up on this. I mean, Trans Against Groomers, we have a backlog of people that are wanting access to some of our private spaces because they want to be involved in this more, because I don't believe that the general trans community, I think that there's 8%, the 8% rule, where there's 8% of extremes on both sides that get all the attention, and then, except for in this case, politicians and have gravitated to the very far left activists that are pushing this stuff, and that's why we're seeing it go in this direction. But we do have a lot of people that are starting to stand up, fight back, and push against it. And like I said, I'm here to be a shield for you. You guys have the numbers to affect change nationwide, parents and anybody that's concerned. Whereas the trans community of itself is small. Those that agree with us are even smaller, and then those willing to stand out or stand up against it are even smaller than that, because most trans people have gone on, they've transitioned, and then they live stealth, and so they're comfortable. So why would they want to stand up and take the heat, take the hate that comes with standing up? And it's not just from the left; it's also from the extreme rights want to stand up and hate us too. So it's not just most of it comes from the left. But why would you step up and stand out if you're just living your life normally and that's all you want to do? I think that's what most people just want to do, and that's what most trans people just want to go stealth and say, and just live their lives as they see fit. But we can't right now. So I'm going to close up and just say thank you for being here. It actually means a lot to me that you guys showed up. You're here, and it's going to make a difference when we just have to see the light at the end of the tunnel. And I don't think the elections went the way that we thought they would.
No, not at all.
But at the end of the day,
Well, for me,
we saw a lot of school boards flip across the country, and that's the bright spot right there. But again, if you guys want to look up my information too, you guys can go. My website's just sarahhigdon.com. I have links to all the articles I've written. I have links to all my social medias, and you guys can find me there. So again, I thank you guys for showing up. Thank you for being here, and thank you for doing what you guys do. And then I open the floor to any questions that you guys have.
That was a very good presentation. I totally enjoyed it, and I commend you for your bravery for doing this. Have you ever had a parent come up to you after one of your presentations that had an aha moment regarding their own child?
You know, not regarding their own child. But I will tell you, I mean, I generally have spoken, and this is my third event. I did a couple with no left turn education as well. And I will tell you that I speak in front of conservatives all the time. And so when I get on stage, they don't necessarily know what to think about me. And then once I get done, I usually have a lot of people coming up and just tell me that they changed their mind about how they actually feel about trans people.
Mm-hmm.
And so I can feel, and honestly, I can feel the energy shift in the room, like just a calm come over the room when we speak. And actually, the first event that I did was in Georgia with Chloe Cole, and so that was like, everybody was like, oh, okay. And me and Chloe are a good tag team, so.
Why do you think the schools are pushing this so greatly?
I hate to say it, but I think it's my generation. My generation are now teachers. And so, you remember when we had so many people that said, you know, when you get out of school, you're going to join the real world and then you're going to stop. Well, that didn't happen. Those people that were, you know, socialists and all this stuff, instead of going into the real world, they went into schools. And instead of changing to how the schools were, they changed the schools. And so now they're pushing their ideologies, their Marxism, onto the rest of the population. And you don't get a lot of conservatives, I don't think, that go into teaching, unfortunately.
Isn't it also though because the schools, to get federal funding, they have to go along with it, they don't have any choices?
I don't know as much about funding. I know most schools are funded locally, but that is a good point because with SEL in schools, SEL, and now the next step is Learning 2025. You're absolutely right, it's all equity-based. And so when you're putting all this equity into schools, and then you look at all these corporations going to ESG, all of this is a social credit score that's being pushed, and now they're indoctrinating children with all these equity-based education programs where they consider your, this actually goes to your point as well, where they're considering your EQ score, which is your emotional quotient score instead of IQ, they're considering that to be more valuable than your IQ. And so that's why they're so involved in the emotional benefits to children. And so they think they're doing the right thing emotionally for children if they're having issues with their gender and stuff like that. And so I think that's the biggest issue that we're seeing is when it comes to SEL being put into schools. And like I said, that's kind of being, so I did a full article on this too, but you see the same players involved. So Kessel is the organization that's kind of created SEL. It's funded by Bill Gates. And the Zuckerberg Foundation are two of the biggest ones in there. And if you know, also the Zuckerberg Foundation is creating what's called Panorama Ed, which is an app for a teacher's phone, to where they can tell us, they can basically say, this student did something bad today, or this student did something good today. That is a social credit system. That will follow them through school to say, this is a problem child, or this is a good child, and they will probably get benefits if they're good, and they will probably get, you know, they get put into certain groups if they're bad. And actually that was part of the Kessel guidance was, or the Pan Am guidance was that you can separate students and put them into certain groups and have like focus groups with those children at like lunchtime. So if they're bad kids, then they get special treatment for being, you know, problem children, and then they get more attention that way and not as many privileges in school.
Do you have thoughts on activists who want to, so there's a lot of different messaging you can go with when you are confronting these issues. Some people are like, you know, like a Billboard Chris style, or like, you know, some more extreme messaging of like, you know, don't mess with my kids, I'll kill you, to where I try to be more about, hey, we need to have a conversation about kids transitioning. Do you have any thoughts about messaging?
I think we all play our roles.
Yeah.
One thing you'll notice about me personally, I try to respect the other side. What you won't see me do And you won't actually see me misgender a trans person. Now, I wrote a full article about Dylan Mulvaney and never used a single pronoun because I don't believe Dylan is who Dylan says they are. But I will respect Dylan enough to use her name. Which is what actually I ask anybody too. If you don't feel comfortable using she, her pronouns for me, just use my name. And what you say when I'm not present is not my business. But I think we all have our roles to play, like I said. So I have a unique perspective, and I think trans people are more likely to listen to me. But if I misgender a trans person, that's going to shut everybody's ears off. And actually, I saw my name on a Reddit board recently, and that was exactly what the person said. They actually had respect for me, that they were kind of more of a leftist, but they had respect for me because they never heard me misgender somebody. So again, I'm getting through to some people just by doing that. Billboard Chris has a great style because he goes out and just puts out a billboard and allows people to come up and talk to him. And he is so calm in what he does, and he just kind of shows how crazy the other activists are. So he brings a lot of light to, we're not out here acting crazy, all I do is have a sign on. Like, it just makes them look, give that appearance when it goes to the media. There can be in-your-face style protests. I mean, to get in front of a crowd that disagrees with you and then try to have a conversation with them is a great style as well. I mean, if we were to have protests here tonight, I would go and try to talk to themselves. At the same point, I think everybody can do what they do, just don't advocate violence. It's one thing that we get accused of all the time, but we don't advocate violence. And I think actually, and that's the thing, is violence in and of itself turns people away from your message anyways. I mean, people don't react well when you're protesting and destroying things. I mean, the whole oil protests right now where they're destroying, or they're throwing stuff on paintings and stuff, that turns people away from their message. People aren't listening to their message because it's destroying something beautiful, and nobody's going to listen to that. And so I think if you can stop short of that, if that's where you feel your place is, then go for it. But like I said, everybody has their roles to play, and mine's speaking out, doing what I do, and Chris has what he's doing, which is awesome too, and we all kind of come together, because we actually do run in very small knit circles. Like, I've never met Chris, but I know a lot of people who are really close to him as well.
We have time for one more question before we go to Candice.
Okay. You, actually.
So you defined what a woman is for us earlier. Can you define what you believe a trans person is?
Yeah, so for me, I'll just define it in terms of trans woman. Trans woman is an adult male that has gender dysphoria and then takes steps to, that has gender dysphoria and then takes steps to live and be perceived by society as the opposite sex. And again, that doesn't make us the opposite sex, it's a perception of what we, we're based on stereotypes that, most people would say, you present that way. I mean, there's gender dysphoria shows itself in so many different ways, because when I look in the mirror, I see everything that makes me male. And that's my gender dysphoria. That would give me anxiety because of that, and everything like that. For the most part, transitioning has helped that. That's the design of transitioning. That's why they say it's the treatment for gender dysphoria.
What does SELG stand for?
Social emotional learning. So that emotional point, again, is the E in the EQ score. And it's an equity-based learning model.
Sorry, go ahead. One last question, then we are going to go to
You had one
Candice.
good point, and that really is what always strikes me, is you said, why can't you wait till they're 18? What's the rush? So that's where my problem comes in. I'm Catholic. I respect all people, but how can we make people understand that it's not that we don't disrespect that they want to be transgender, but we believe that they need to wait wait.
Right.
Because as a child, they just can't wait. You know, children want to be a firefighter, they want to be this, but they've changed their mind so many times. So that's where the problem comes in, I have with the schools, that they encourage that. You know, and I think that's what we need to address more. It's not that we have an issue with the people, it's just that they need to make choices, and children can't make those choices yet. So that's why I don't understand why the schools are in such a rush. Do you know why they, and the politicians, why do they rush the children?
Money. Yeah,
okay.
That's exactly what it is. It's money. And again, that's why I'm out here speaking, is because if you guys go to school boards and you speak up, they're calling you terrorists, they're calling you all this stuff, they're calling you transphobic. Whereas when this event was announced, I was called an anti-trans person. So. but that's where I think my role is to provide a shield for the parents that are speaking out, because I do believe that you guys are not transphobic people. You guys agree with letting people live however they see fit when they're an adult. And again, we have to protect children.
But there's doctors telling children.
I have one more speaker that's going to zoom in, and we only have 8 minutes left. And I know if you have questions, you can talk to me or Sarah later. I'm so sorry. We'll see if we have time at the end. So I just want to introduce to you Candice Jackson. Let me. Oh, good. You guys can see her. I'm not sure. Let's see how to get her big. Sorry, Candice. I might just have to keep you small so we don't lose time. So Candice Jackson, again, is an attorney, and she's going to give you a legal perspective on gender ideology being taught to students in schools. Let's see if we can hear Candice. Okay.
Thank you, Nicole. Can you hear me okay?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, perfect.
Hopefully? Okay, good. Nicole wanted me to leave you all with a few thoughts as we wrap up from a very informative and insightful discussion today. So I thought I'd approach it this way. If you're thinking about engaging with your kid's school, talking to a teacher or principal, or showing up at a school board meeting, think about it from this perspective. Why not teach school children about gender identity? Well, what's the harm? I mean, after all, it's just about being inclusive and nice and kind, right? So it's important to think through and highlight for schools just some of the reasons why not only is it not actually inclusive, nice, and kind to everyone involved to indoctrinate students into a set of beliefs that run counter to reality and facilitate the kind of psychological and medical harms that you've been hearing about, but also violate the legal rights of others. And so cautioning schools that they are on a razor's edge right now. They may be hearing that, hey, if we don't put into place inclusive policies, we'll get sued. Well, they're in just as much legal danger if they do. And here are at least 3 reasons why that I'll leave you with in our last few minutes here. First of all, it's not possible to give any teaching or instruction or description, especially to younger kids, of gender identity theory without essentially promoting a faith-based belief system. And Nicole touched on this. That violates the rights of every student, teacher, and family in the school community. Kids have a right to be educated, especially in a public school, in an environment of religious and atheistic pluralism, not school-sponsored or school-endorsed establishment and promotion of what amounts to a faith system. It's not the public school's place to teach students faith as if it's fact. Or to teach students that unprovable beliefs about an inner gender soul or feeling. They call it identity instead of soul, but it's kind of the same thing when you hear them talk about it. It's not a school's place to teach kids that kind of dogma as though it's truth, reality, and fact. Schools need to stay in their lane, leave mysticism and faith up to individual students and their families, respect the beliefs or unbeliefs of everyone, and not endorse or promote any particular beliefs, and focus on getting back to teaching knowledge based in material reality and critical thinking skills. So that's one reason. The right to believe and practice the faith or none at all gets violated for everyone if a school insists on compelling everyone in a school environment to learn about gender identity theory as though it's just another set of facts about the world. Number two, schools are becoming a school-to-surgery pipeline. Social transition, in and of itself, social transition, oh, it's just names and pronouns that are getting changed, what's the harm in that? Social transition itself is a serious psychological intervention into a child's development. Schools are not competent to undertake that. Evidence is showing more and more that kids who are socially transitioned are highly likely to move on to medical transition. And that is now in direct contrast to the studies and evidence that Sara was pointing out, which is that if cared about, supported, but basically left alone in terms of being neutral and not affirming the notion of change of sex, 80% or more of kids will grow out of it as they go through puberty. By the way, many of those kids are gender non-conforming and will grow up to be gay or lesbian adults. So that's yet another reason why please don't fall for the trap that by objecting to gender ideology being taught to your kids in schools that you are in any way, shape, or form necessarily taking some kind of anti-homosexual rights or anti-gay stance. Medical transition being directly linked to social transition means that schools are effectively denying a lot of children the right to grow up healthy and whole. Sara talked a lot about the potential for sexual reproduction and sexual function deprivation, among many other serious lifelong physical health complications involved in these medical procedures. Third, schools cannot really socially transition a student, even with parental consent, in any full or meaningful way without trampling over the rights of other students and teachers. So for example, if a school's policy says that everyone around you must use wrong sex pronouns that you have chosen for yourself, that violates the free speech rights of others. And it also may constitute an establishment clause violation of the mandate that a public school, a government school, is supposed to keep government and religion very separate. Here's a side issue with schools that I don't think gets talked about nearly enough. Compelling everyone to avoid stating simple facts like this person is a man, this person is a woman, there are two sexes, male and female, or to use made-up language and remember at all given times this constantly evolving set of neologisms and made-up new language that is dribbling out of queer theory. It is maybe also violating the rights, particularly of students with disabilities, some of whom find it difficult and confusing to override their own sense perceptions or to remember the politically correct words that are allowed or not allowed to be used to simply describe what they're seeing in front of them. Or, other examples, if a school policy insists that a boy be treated like a girl with regard to sports or sex education class or any other activity or space that has always lawfully been provided separately but comparably to boys and to girls, the school's then violating the rights of, say, female students to equal educational opportunities that are free from sex discrimination. Under Title IX in particular, which applies to all public schools in the country, because it's tied to federal funding, Title IX is concerned with how schools prevent and respond to sexual harassment and sexual assault in a school environment. And when you start forcing schools to make all spaces and activities mixed sex, co-ed, and nothing anymore is allowed to remain single sex so that there are intimate spaces and activities provided on a female-only basis, it removes safeguarding and prevention measures that are particularly important to girls for prevention and protection against sexual harassment and sexual assault, in addition to just basic bodily privacy and dignity issues. So with that, I see that I might have stretched this out one extra minute, but I hope I left you with some good thoughts, and really appreciate Nicole and Sarah letting me join you both here today.
Thank you so much, Candice.
Can I add on to something like that too?
Yeah.
Because, so she also talked about hiding, when we talk about social transitions, hiding that from parents. I don't know how that does a child any good either, because think about a child who, like I suffer from anxiety. A child that's already having mental health issues, what kind of anxiety does that bring up in that child when now they've told somebody, and now they don't know if their parents, when they go to parent-teacher conference, if that teacher's gonna slip, or if one of their classmates is gonna slip, or if one of their classmates that's a bully or something is just gonna go tell their parents. That is even worse because you're just raising that anxiety level in some of these children as well. And actually, to close this out, I actually wanted to give this idea to how to think about gender ideology. So I saw this meme, and it's kind of funny. It says sexism is the woman does the dishes. Feminism is anyone can do the dishes. And gender ideology is whoever does the dishes is a woman.
Thank you everyone for coming. Sorry for taking up everyone's time.